Good morning, class. This is Mrs. Pender Harrison. Today we are going to be taking some notes on theme and plot in narratives. Go ahead and pause the video to set up your Cornell Notes page. By the time you're done, your notes should look something like this picture over to the right, although yours will be on binder paper. And your essential question for this morning is, what is the difference between the plot of a narrative and the theme? When we're talking about theme, or the theme of a narrative, that could be a short story, a play, a novel, we are looking for the central message, concern, or insight into life that is expressed through the literary work. This theme is more than just one word. It needs to be able to be expressed by one or two sentences about human beings or about life. Now, the theme sometimes is directly stated by the author, and in other stories, it is implied, which means that it's not a one sentence that you will find in the story. You'll have to infer what the theme is. Your interpretation of the literary work is what uncovers the theme. Plot, however, is what happens and how it happens in a narrative or a story, short story, a drama, play, or a novel. A narrative is any work that tells a story. These are some terms that you may feel like are familiar. We're going to go over the definition one more time anyway. The exposition of a story is a part of the plot. It is the event that gives rise to the conflict. It's sort of our opening situation, and it usually happens at the beginning of the story. The rising action are the events that complicate or intensify the central conflict. The climax, which is sometimes called the turning point of the story, is the highest point of interest or emotional involvement in the story. After the turning point, we have the falling action, which is the logical result of the climax, whatever happens immediately after that turning point. And finally, we have the resolution. This is the end of the story, the final outcome, what happens towards the end and after the conflict. This diagram that you see in front of you is probably pretty familiar to you. It's called a plot diagram. We used to teach plot in this very systematic way, that you have your beginning exposition, then your rising action, climax in the middle, falling action, and the end and the resolution. Some stories follow this pattern, but more often than not, your stories might look more like this. You have the exposition, and then a whole lot of the novel is spent on the rising action. And the climax happens more towards the end of the novel than right smack in the middle. The falling action then is usually much shorter than the rising action. We don't spend, an hour and a half of an Avengers movie finding out what happens after the big battle. There's a lot of lead up, big battle, and then sort of what happens afterwards. And the resolution is on a different plane than the exposition, because for the most part, your characters, your setting has changed. So we don't end up all the way back down here if we're looking at this diagram. Go ahead and take a moment to finish wrapping up your notes. These two diagrams you should have drawn in your notes as well, and we will RQ and S your notes next class. Good night.